Well, good afternoon. Welcome to TCB's Technology Fraud Prevention Tips virtual event. I'm Allison Kaplin, Editor-in-Chief of Twin Cities Business. Thank you for joining us over the lunch hour for what promises to be a really educational workshop. I know I speak for myself when I say that. I could use a lot of help. My guess is that many of you are tuning in from your home office, a shift made by many individuals in 2020 and 2021. It's only fitting that along with the increase in digital activity, we discuss navigating the cybersecurity challenges we face now more than ever. To help us tackle the topic, we've brought in a couple of experts today who will provide some tips to improve employee experience, manage data assets, prevent cyber attacks, and more. Thanks for being here, Tim and Mike. I'm going to introduce both of you in just a minute, but I also want to just welcome our audience and thank you all for joining us and tell you that you can feel free to use the comment section to post comments, questions, and even network with one another during the event. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can. Now, let's meet our experts, Tim Bornholdt and Mike Burgard. Tim is from the Jed Mahonis Group. He's an entrepreneur, developer, and podcaster. He's co-founder and partner at the Jed Mahonis Group, a Minneapolis-based iOS and Android app development firm that works in partnership with a business's existing team to build custom mobile software that improves their processes and increases their bottom line. Thanks for being here today, Tim.
Excited to be here.
Tim is joined by Mike Burgard, and I want Mike's office. Doesn't it just look lovely? Who would know whether it's real or is it just an illusion? The magic of 2021, right, Mike? Mike is Chief Information Security Officer with Marco Technologies. He joined the company as a solutions architect in 2016. With 20 years of experience in the IT industry, Mike specializes in security and data solutions. Mike helps customers identify risk, evaluate best methods of protection for their systems, and secure their information assets. He holds certifications including CISSP, CISM, and multiple others from EMC, Checkpoint, VMware, and ITIL. So glad both of you could join us today. Let's dive in. I'm going to ask the really dumb question. I'm sure most people in our audience know this and they're here for more nuanced answers, but just in case, let's start with the basics. Ransomware, malware, words that we hear in the news on the daily lately. Can you just explain what we're even talking about? Tim, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, we can kind of, there's a lot to unpack obviously in this, but I think to keep it simple and plain, ransomware is when somebody, usually a malicious actor of some sort, decides that they want access to your information and they want some money. So they find a way into your systems. They take whatever information they can get, any data worth value, and then they encrypt it. They make it so you can't access it in any way. And as a result, they then ask you for money to unlock that. And if you don't give them the money, they either delete all your data that is locked away and encrypted, or they decide to release it publicly. Either one of those could be obviously very bad scenarios. And basically it works. That's why people are doing it these days. So that's kind of why we're here, is to talk about what it is and how we can help prevent that.
Right. And we've seen many of these high profile cases in the news lately. Is it generally bigger companies that they go after, Mike, or is it just that those are the ones that make the news?
Yeah, the larger ones are the ones that grab the headlines, unfortunately. In reality, small businesses or organizations with under 1,000 users or employees are the ones that are typically targeted at almost a 2-to-1 rate. So we do see the SMB space continue to be exploited. They continue to be ransomed. They continue to be targeted at really increasing numbers. It's just not the attention grabbing typically that we see with the large companies.
Wow. It feels like we're seeing a dramatic increase in this? Like, ransomware didn't used to be a daily, weekly headline. Now it is. Is it just that we're more aware, or is there really an uptick? And what in the world is causing it? Mike, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll take that first. So it's absolutely increasing. We're seeing ransomware increase at almost a 250% rate year over year. It's up phenomenal this year, and not in a good way. We see phishing continue to increase at typically a 6 to 7x rate, and phishing typically leads to ransomware, right? So we've got both the cause and the effect increasing at alarming rates, and I think it's always been there. I think what's really grabbed attention is once we saw people putting gasoline in trash bags, that really caused everybody to take a look at, hey, this stuff can affect me personally. It's not just my business. We've seen a number of other events throughout the course of 2021 that have also been attention grabbing, both in terms of headlines and actual impact to organizations. And that's really what's brought it to the forefront, I think, of conversation recently.
Tim, what would you add to that? Why do you think this is happening right now?
I think just like with everything with the pandemic, everything changed. And I think crime is no exception to that. Criminals have changed. Criminals have evolved. There's better ways and easier ways for criminals to get access to your company's crown jewels. It used to be a lot harder when you'd have to go in and physically do something to get at this information. Now it's as easy as sending out some blanket phishing attacks and seeing who bites.
Mm-hmm. So is that, how much does the pandemic play a role in this uptick? Is it that we're doing important work at home now versus at the office? Is that a big factor?
It can be, and I do think it is. I guess just like with the pandemic, it showed everything that's going on in society. We've seen every facet of our lives have been impacted. So again, business is no exception. And with people leaving kind of the comfort and safety of a network that is protected within your organization's infrastructure, taking your devices and moving them to, say, a Starbucks Wi-Fi spot, or even your home hotspot and network, those are areas that aren't as easy to protect when you're sitting in Mike's chair, for example. so it's, yeah, the pandemic has definitely caused some changes and accelerated this kind of problem.
I'm curious, Mike, just even within your own company, within Marco, when everybody went remote, what changed? What new concerns did you have in your role?
Yeah, certainly a lot changed, and not a lot at the same time, right? I think we went through what every company did, but we were maybe a little bit ahead on the work from home curve, being a technology company. Quite a number of our user base already worked remote or from home, whether it be a Starbucks coffee shop, as Tim pointed out, or the home office. And to be frank, there's very little difference in between from a data security perspective. A majority of our data was in the cloud, and continues to be in the cloud. And really the things that changed for me, I think, were it highlighted the legacy security architectures or technology architectures that we had. And what I mean by that is things like VPN technologies. VPNs are something that many of us use on a day-to-day basis, yet it's 25-year-old technology, right? It's technology that really was designed for a different day in time when people didn't really work from home. They didn't work remote. It was meant to be very limited use. To now we're seeing adoption of newer technologies in what I would call modern security architectures, that where VPNs maybe aren't used as much, right? Where we move on to just-in-time access and more cloud security. The area that had highlighted the most for us was cloud security. We had to do quite a bit to get more visibility in terms of cloud and seeing what people were accessing from their home locations, taking that device home, and really expanding or extending our security capabilities onto that laptop. And that's what every organization that we work with really went through at a very quick pace last year, as well as, can we extend really those old brick and mortar security technologies that ran in an environment or in a data center? Can we extend that to protect the user when they're at home, no longer on our network? Wow. As we go forward?
It's a big undertaking. So should we all be moving off of our VPNs? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's definitely newer technologies, there's newer ways of doing things. We look at a lot of the exploits this year are exploiting those older technologies, VPNs being one of them, the old remote desktop protocol, and some of the older ways of remoting into our environment through remote desktop or other various applications, VPNs, et cetera. We really are seeing strong urging from a lot of the core providers, being Microsoft, being CISA, or the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or really Department of Homeland Security in the US government. There's a lot of push from a lot of organizations like that that are saying, hey, these older technologies are part of what's allowing us to be exploited. And that's, I think, why we see this association to, hey, we all went to work from home as part of the pandemic, and all these security things are all of a sudden popping up at an alarming rate. Well, sure, because we activated older technologies that maybe hadn't been used for a period, or that we at least had to bring up to a larger scale. So we're adding in new technologies to support that additional capacity. And it's exploiting really older security flaws in architectures that had oftentimes been put away, we had to bring back, right? So we definitely saw we saw older stuff become new again, and it wasn't necessarily a good thing for us.
That's so interesting, Mike. And I've talked to other people, actually, some of your colleagues at Marco, just about, thinking all the things that we started thinking about literally overnight last year. It seems like so long ago now, but, access to printers and just things that we took for granted that you do at the office. How do you do those things at home, and what equipment do you need? Did you immediately see, we're going to have to think about what security we need? Was that immediately apparent?
Yeah, security, it's unfortunately, it's a business problem more so than a technology problem, first and foremost. So we have to understand that security needs to be talked about in every business process, every business thing that we're doing. But it is absolutely a technology thing as well. There's a technological component to it. And every device that we connect nowadays exposes it exposes us to certain types of risks, right? An iPhone exposes certain risks that maybe a printer doesn't have, but a printer exposes other risks. It's still on my network. It still has access in most cases to all of my workstations and my servers. And it actually generally runs an operating system on the device that's more powerful than people give it credit for. It's not just printing things out, right? It's got that ability to scan to an address book or maybe an online location. And because it can do those things, it's an avenue into my environment, which means it still poses risk. And in some cases, it can pose significantly more risks than others because it's often forgot about. So yeah, every piece of technology that we put on a network or that we touch carries risk to it. I think everybody should take that one away, that there is absolutely risk there. And those risks do need to be understood. They need to be treated or mitigated appropriately as well.
So here we are, we're all zooming in today from remote locations. Work is happening everywhere. It appears that that's probably going to continue to a certain extent. What do we do now? What are the things we should be thinking about? Tim, what would you start with?
I think that security, especially, technology, people are always intimidated and worried that they're doing something wrong with technology. And I think that the first thing that you can do is just understand some basic, simple things about technology. To Mike's point, there's all kinds of technological fixes to these problems. But even if you buy the fanciest, heaviest duty door and lock combination to your house, if you forget to lock it, or you leave the key under a rock in front of the house, that's not going to do anything for you. The door is useless. So understanding some basic things about security. And I think that's one thing that I've found is a lot of times when you just kind of mandate from on high, like you need to use unique passwords and you need to, use our VPN or whatever kind of tools that you get mandated from, people kind of look at that and say, okay, whatever, and just kind of move on. But they don't think through, these are the actual things that are causing these ransomware attacks to accelerate in growth. So I think to answer your question, I think it's really just becoming aware of just what are these attacks? What is a phishing attack? How can I be vulnerable through a phishing attack? And why do I need to have a password manager? Understanding the reasons why might help you to actually do the best practices and keep your business as safe as it can be.
Well, Mike, anything that you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think Tim did a nice job of hitting it. It's a people problem, it's a business problem, and it's a technology problem. All three of those segments have to be balanced, otherwise the stool tips over. That's really what I would add to it is business itself needs to understand that it is a business problem. We have to address security in business process, in technology, and we have to make those investments in our people, and we have to encourage people to do the right things. It's a people problem in that cybersecurity doesn't start at 8 in the morning and end at 5 p.m. It really is a way of life. We need to take a lot of the principles that our businesses tell us to do into our home life, right? Don't use the same passwords for things. LinkedIn just had another data breach this week, and passwords supposedly weren't part of that. If passwords were, though, how many people on the call use the same password for LinkedIn that they do for Facebook or Amazon or their work account? That alone just opened up substantial risk potentially to your organization or to you personally. And then there is the technology component. And Tim I can't emphasize that enough. No piece of technology will provide 100% protection. It doesn't work that way. You bring the big door in, like Tim said, there's people can leave the key, which I would equate to the people opening the door, maybe clicking the fish. You can also just go smash a window in and crawl in somewhere else. So, and it's no different in cybersecurity. There's always another way. And the more we continue to use a variety of technology and devices to do things, the larger that attack surface gets. And we need to understand that. And again, educate our people to do the right thing all the time, not just at work. It really is a lifestyle.
Let's talk about passwords for just one more minute, because that seems like, one of those things that it's in our control. It's something that every computer user encounters, and we all do really dumb things like using our dog's name 123, over and over. How much does using those, automatic generated, really complicated passwords that we could never remember, how much does that help? And I mean, are passwords really kind of giving away the keys to the kingdom? Tim, do you want to start?
Yeah, it matters. It matters a lot. And again, just like Mike said, it takes you we all sign up for things all the time online. We go to a shopping cart on some store and we create an account on there, and it says, hey, create an account to sign in easier. So you type in your standard email and password, and then you forget about it. You never remember that you made that account. And then 3 years later, that site gets hacked and they didn't encrypt passwords. And now that username and password are out on the internet for any hacker to go around and find all of the accounts associated with that. It's critical that you use unique passwords. And I think the problem is that people think that you need to use, first of all, people think that you can just do dog name 123 and that's going to really fool a computer. It's not. If you use just basic English words and letters, and even if you change the I to an exclamation point, that's not going to fool a computer. If somebody wants to get in on your information, you can run scripts that can crack passwords like nothing. So having uniquely generated passwords is crucial. And I think one thing to really emphasize is that you can use password managers. We use 1Password with our organization. There's so many different tools that you can use. And I just pulled up my 1Password to look. I have 1,630 passwords saved in this. Now, I'm a nerd and I build websites for a living and I generate a lot of passwords. So I know I'm not the normal, but you probably can think of hundreds and hundreds of accounts that you have across the internet. If every single one of those has a unique password, that's going to minimize the likelihood that you're going to be attacked later on. So that's why it's super easy to get into one of those password managers. Use it, love it. It's going to make your life easier, and it's going to make me and Mike a lot happier.
And here I thought I was so clever using the exclamation mark in place of the I. Shoot. So Tim, explain for those who are just overwhelmed at the thought of this and don't want one more thing to think of, and that's why I think a lot of us tend to use the same thing over and over. Do you always have your passport management system open, so wherever you're going, you can just reference what crazy code you're using for that site?
Yeah, most of them, like 1Password, for example, there's a quick keyboard shortcut you can trigger. And even now they have it where it's just you go to the website and it pulls itself up and says open in 1Password. And then you click one button and it fills your stuff in and you go. You don't have to think about, all you have to remember is the 1Password that is the one that gets into your password management system. And then from there, it just remembers it everywhere. And it works on my iPhone. It works on my iPad, everywhere that you can think of having those passwords, it's available.
Is that something that more companies need to institute or mandate across the board? Is there a way to do that? Mike, what do you recommend to your clients?
Yeah, for sure. Companies need to start looking at these technologies, and it's we recommend, first off, we recommend that you do it. Second off, we have a couple of different vendors that we recommend when we do it, but we're starting to see frameworks actually require this, right? So the new versions of CIS controls, or Centers for Internet Security, for example, they're starting to reference this finally. NIST, the cybersecurity framework, probably the benchmark in the United States for cybersecurity, is also starting to adopt these things, and some of the new draft proposals coming out to where this will probably be a foundational technology going forward, meaning it's very rudimentary. If you don't have it, it's very hard to be considered any level of maturity at all, other than basic. And we're seeing it also supported on the cyber insurance side as well. So we're seeing it in the reactive side to where, hey, passwords really are critical, because most instances of phishing, business email compromise, even ransomware, a password was used somewhere as part of that exfiltration of data, part of that exploit, or part of that ransom as we go through it. So passwords really are critical, to the point that this will be a thing. Passwordless technology, I would say, is also on the horizon. It's actually not that far out. There are some successful technologies out today. They're probably more limited, which is why people haven't heard about them at scale, but passwordless will absolutely be a thing. And a very good example of that is Windows Hello for Business, or Apple's Face ID, right? Logging into your Mac or to your Windows device. Those are technologies that there's still a password there. That password still exists, but you don't use it on a day-to-day basis because it's embedded within a device. And I think you'll see those technologies really explode here in the next 12 to 18 months.
That's kind of new to me. Can you just explain that a little more? How is that different, especially if you're not putting a password in?
Yeah, so on those devices, say a Windows laptop, for example, there's a little security chip within that device, or a trusted platform module is what it's called. And that security chip actually stores your password, and there's a little token that it uses to match that with you. When you log in, you don't actually have to type your password, because it'll use the camera or maybe a PIN code or another way to identify that that actually is you on that specific device, and then it'll accept that as the password because it basically matches up that token. And that's how it passes through. And it's very similar to how Face ID works on an iPhone, for example. There's a security chip within that device that's still storing that password. Like I said, that password still exists. You just don't have to type it every single time. There's some things happening with that security chip and the device that matches your verification, and it confirms you are who you say you are, and it lets you authenticate through without having to type that password.
We're not seeing the criminals start to find ways around Face ID technology. Please tell me that.
It's happened. Actually, it has already happened, and Apple's, they fixed it through security updates. And to be frank, any technology out there will always have vulnerabilities, but there's a difference between a vulnerability that will be patched and fixed versus something that's continually exploitable. And unfortunately, a password is something that it's always going to be one of the weakest links in the system until we can get rid of it. So moving to, again, more of a passwordless state, I think using those technologies, that is a good thing. And that is something I would encourage everybody to take a look at.
Okay, good. So the homework for today, we all need to go and add a password server and make sure that we're not using the kids' names and the dogs' names anymore.
Football 2021.
Right. So beyond passwords, what are other mistakes that employees are making? What are things that we humans, we individuals working for companies can do to help keep our own data and a company's data safe? Tim, what would you start with?
I think that one interesting thing I've learned about ransomware attacks and phishing attacks is that the most successful ones don't tend to happen from 9 to 5. They tend to happen when you're, like, say, you're at a brewery with your wife and you're 3 beers deep and your wife goes to the bathroom. So you're like, I'm going to check my email and just see what's going on. And you're not thinking about it. And you get this email that looks a little suspicious, but it probably is fine. And then you click on it, bam, they're in. It's those off hour times and not being vigilant with accessing it when you're reading your email and being aware of these cybersecurity things. So I think that's one thing that you can definitely take away from this talk as well is be on the lookout every time you open your email. Be as cynical as you possibly can. Just whenever you see an email that says, recruitment 2021, and it kind of looks like it's from your boss, but you're not entirely sure. find another way to contact them before you open that up. That's really how a lot of these attacks are happening, is they're catching people off guard and tricking people when they're least expecting it.
You mean just the act of opening that email can trigger some sort of infiltration?
It can trigger the starts. So it's just like, if you click the email, it's not like all of a sudden your whole system is just going to, it doesn't, it's not like that, but it's the first start. It's the key. It's the crack in the foundation. It's just like Mike said, it's like the smashing of the window. If you even have Fort Knox going, that's their one way in, is if you kind of open the door for them and let them in, and then they can start doing all of the sniffing around your networks and figuring out what's going on in your systems.
That's tricky though, because sometimes you don't know from the subject line, or it just automatically opens up. What do you suggest?
I think it's just being skeptical of everything that comes in through your email. And even if there's a whiff of something that looks suspicious or funny, err on the side of caution. I don't think like any boss of any company is going to be mad at you for calling them and saying, hey, did you send this email, or texting them, or just getting a hold of them and verifying before you go and open an attachment or click on a link.
Right. Right. I just want to remind our audience, when you post a question, make sure you're posting it to the panelists and the attendees so everyone can see. We did have somebody ask if the two of you can name your top password managers. Mike's already on it and responding in the chat, but Mike, do you want to just quickly go over those? And are those are more for personal, not for the company?
Yeah, so those three are going to be the top, what I would say, personal use ones. We do see a lot of organizations buy them, but password managers are an interesting thing, right? As a company, we encourage password manager use, but we don't provide it because we want that employee to take it with them if they leave employment. They've got a lot of personal passwords in there, like their Amazon, Facebook, et cetera. And the only way typically that people will use those is if you let them use it for everything. That's typically what we've seen. So that's where we encourage use, and we really do push for that. And those are, I'd say, are the top three. There's differences between each. I'd say get whatever one fits you and your family's use best, and note that there are family integrations between them as well that can make things great. And I'm just going to take this next one as part of this. So it is Chrome's built-in password manager secure. I would say that I would steer away from any of the ones built into any of the browsers by default. They've all had significantly more weaknesses than typically a dedicated password management solution. Knowing that that all three of them that I mentioned, 1Password, LastPass, and Dashlane, all do have browser integrations within them though. So by using any one of those products, it will allow you to plug into the browser and do exactly what Tim said. When you go to a site, oftentimes it'll pop up and allow it to pass credentials straight through, making it very easy to use.
At risk of getting myself in trouble with our IT people, I will reveal, and this is kind of piggybacking on something you said, Mike, we have for our company, kind of an official place where we're supposed to keep passwords, like the company's passwords, but it's a pain to go there. And so maybe there are like one or two that I need that I've put in I use Dashlane, so I'm winning there. That's approved by the two of you. Thank you very much. But so maybe, just maybe, I've put a couple of my passwords in my own personal Dashlane. Does that become a problem? Because if I've done that, I'm sure others have done that. And now I'm mixing company and personal. How big of a problem is that?
Tim, go ahead.
I guess I would say you're going to do it. Like we're all human. It's part of what we do, and it's a convenience factor. I don't think that there's any necessarily inherent problems with putting the company passwords in your own 1Password or FastPass or Fast whatever. Because ideally, then your company, when you leave and you're no longer working at Twin Cities Business, your company will go through and change those passwords so that when you've left, those passwords no longer work, and it's just you've got some cruft data in your password manager. So I don't think that just by putting them in there by default, it's a bad thing. You should be practicing good hygiene from the company should be responsible for that side of things.
They're going to lock me out forever. I like that. Good
Exactly.
Hygiene with passwords. Mike, would you second that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The CISO and me would say defer to your company's security policy first and foremost. But in general, I would agree with the spirit of that. Just don't hold them hostage when you leave too. If your company does say, hey, we need one of those back for some reason, make sure you give it back. That'd be the only other thing I'd add.
Yeah. Does it matter? Some of these issues we're talking about and some of the problems or the ransomware attacks, are there particular industries that are more vulnerable? I mean, it doesn't really matter if you're in the tech space. We're all using technology to do our jobs these days. Does industry make a difference in figuring out how much security you need? Tim, do you want to start?
I think a lot of times again, criminals are trying to go for easy wins. And I don't think that they're specifically discriminate in terms of which industry they go after. You see it across all industries and across all platforms, really. And any kind of business you're running, we've got some startups that we work with who have also, I mean, they were pre-revenue and they were had some ransomware stuff going on. So it doesn't really matter whether the bigger the company you are, obviously the more lucrative the opportunity can be. But small companies are not immune, and just because you're in an industry that you think is boring and doesn't necessarily feel attractive for a malware or a ransomware attacker, that doesn't mean that they're not going to go after you. If there's money to be made, there's money to be made.
Okay. Mike, do you see any patterns in the companies that you work with through Marco?
Yeah, we've seen, so manufacturing and ag companies, actually agriculture, typically are two of the ones that we see more often targeted. And to be frank, it'll close your doors. I mean, that's why manufacturing typically is targeted. It's you're gonna pay the ransom or it will probably permanently close your organization. I would say the more emerging trend now though is supply chain. And we've seen that with Colonial and both JBS as well. And we're seeing that trend as well. If you're part of critical supply chain, it makes you very easy to target because again, it's not just pressure from your own organization. You're going to get pressure from every point in that supply chain to get your operations up and running as quickly as possible again. And unfortunately, not everybody's going to get federal help like we saw with Colonial Pipeline, right? I think we should not assume that the Homeland Security Department or the FBI will come in and save the day because in reality, that's not going to happen. For a vast majority of us, yet we are part of supply chain. So understanding our fit in the supply chain and ecosystem, I think is really important. An interesting trend though, too, you just made me think about it. If I go back a ways, healthcare, I would say is actually one that there's been a number of federal advisories. Healthcare seems to get targeted more often than other industries. And that's largely because of, if you think about it, it's patient care. Patients are potentially life is at risk, or there's other concerns where it's time sensitive, time critical. Meaning that the organization is more likely to just pay the ransom opposed to try some other type of recovery efforts. So if you're in the healthcare industry, we still see healthcare typically targeted, I'd say at a higher rate than some of the other folks out there, but it really is increasing everywhere. I can't stress that enough. It's just some of the things we've seen.
Is there any, I mean, are there efforts underway at a federal level or a state level to, to protect companies against this? Is there insurance that businesses need to be buying? What can we do? Mike, do you want to start?
Yeah, great. Yeah, good. I'd say that's a good two question. Buy two, get one free, maybe. I don't know. Yes, there's cyber insurance, and let's talk about that one for a second. Cyber insurance is something that every organization should have. It doesn't matter if you insource or outsource technology. You as an organization need cyber insurance. If you outsource technology, you still need insurance because something can happen to that provider. And then the reality of it is probably 9 out of 10 times, your employee is still the one that's going to cause it, meaning they're going to click a link on something, they're going to do something that causes a cyber event to happen. It doesn't matter if you've shifted a lot of that technical burden or the security burden to an outsourced platform, you still hold the responsibility for that, right? And I think it's important for organizations to understand that. The second thing is, are we doing anything at a national level? We are, probably not enough yet, but we are starting to see that. Back in May, I think it was May 12th, President Biden signed an executive order that applies to all federal entities that also touches some non-federal entities by how it was enacted, right? And what I mean by that is some of the requirements for federal entities are anybody that now provides software to them has to do a lot more on the security front to ensure that the software providing is free of malicious code or free of other impacts. And Tim's maybe the better one to talk about that, being a developer. But that we're seeing some of that come down that way. there's a lot of talk in Congress now that, hey, maybe we do need cyber legislation. Maybe we need something that's more broad sweeping nationally. And we're starting to see that, right? Europe already has it through GDPR. China has it. There's other countries in the world that do have that. You're going to see that. And to be frank, as a cyber professional, I actually think at a national level, it's a really good thing. I would rather have that than 50 states all have their own unique versions of it. And that's something that I would encourage everybody on this to be thinking about, right? What are the impacts to your organization as we talk about it? And I do think you'll see something be proposed yet again this year. Whether we see something passed or not, that I couldn't tell you. But we are starting to hear a lot more talk about it.
Yeah, Tim, from your point of view, what would you like to see? What do we need? What would be beneficial to protect business interests?
It's hard to say, because I think federally there's been if you look at laws that Congress passes around technology, by the time they've passed that law, we are 5 or 6 years beyond what that law even covers, and it's no longer even relevant. So I think what we really need to see is more, that doesn't take politicians off the hook by any stretch. We still need to be legislating this and increasing punishments and doing what we can to help secure businesses and organizations. On the other hand, I think the onus is on a more open educational policy, that we can all learn more about these attacks and make them so that everyone is aware and we're constantly vigilant in talking about it. I think that more than anything else is going to help protect businesses, because if you can put the power in the hands of the people that are actually potentially, like Mike said, if 9 out of the 10 times you get hacked is because of your own people, then train your people. like go through and have these discussions. I think one thing that we've been doing within our own company, and we do software all day, but that doesn't mean that we do cybersecurity all day. But one thing that we do is, whenever an event like this happens in the public eye and there's a huge press around it, we talk about it. We take 5 minutes at a meeting and we sit around and we bounce ideas off each other and say, what happened? What were the leading causes of this? How can we protect our own organization? And it's learning from the mistakes of other organizations that then can make our own organizations better.
I think that's such a great point, and that's not something that I think gets discussed a lot. And I think most of us who are all have company issued laptops or phones or whatever, we're not really thinking about ourselves in relation necessarily to the bigger picture, or how much opening that email or using that dumb password could really have a major impact for the whole organization. So making it seem relevant and interesting, I think every company needs the two of you to go talk to them, because you guys really bring it home.
Happy to do it.
No, I mean, seriously, I think that's a real challenge, and I don't know how many companies are doing that. And I think employees see the words, cybersecurity training, and their eyes kind of glaze over. All due respect to the two of you. Mike, any techniques or suggestions that you'd have for companies as far as ways to really emphasize to employees how important this is?
Well, we've already talked about it, right? It comes down to education. I think where I see a lot of organizations go wrong in the implementation of education, though, is it seems to be this penalization system, right? You didn't pass so many of these, now you have to watch more training, and that's not effective. What we see be effective in education is it needs to be that positive reinforcement, that continual, make it a challenge, right? Gamify it. Make it something that's a continual challenge to do better than another department, or to do better than so-and-so. That really is what we see as keys to success, right? Gamify it. You got to give away, give trinkets away, give rewards for people that do really well on things, and tell those stories. I think Tim hit it with tell the story. That's probably the single biggest thing is, make sure that if you're a CEO, attend a cyber thing like this once in a while, where we're talking about what are things that can happen, what are the outcomes of this, why is it important to you, and take that back and share it with your organization. Be talking about it in a leadership team, and encourage other teams to talk about their impacts on the cyber ecosystem of the organization that you work for.
Right. Well, there you go. All the companies watching today, we should make this required viewing for your entire team. Tim, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I think one thing, like going to that gamification point, I've seen some organizations go as far as to basically send phishing emails themselves to employees as a test, and kind of make it so that you, you know, the first time you do it, obviously you might be surprised at how many people actually click the link, especially if you can make it convincing and good. But if you are able to, gamify it in such a way where you're periodically sending out these phishing emails and, maybe shaming or doing something to tell people like, hey, you shouldn't have clicked that email. Just really make it clear, like this could have led to a big problem. And on the reverse side, if they get a phishing email and they forward it to the right person and say, hey, this is suspicious. Is there something I should do about it? Reward that behavior. That's exactly what you want. I know there's groups that go out and do this for you, so you can kind of Google around and find something like that, or you can do it yourself. But I think that can be a good way to help. Just a lot of people will see the headlines and say, "Oh, that'll never happen to me," and then all of a sudden they're the guy at Colonial, that made it happen. So just that's one thing I thought I'd add on top of that to kind of make it a little more interesting for your organization, at least.
Yeah, you don't want to be that one guy
Right.
that clicked on the email. And it's all traceable, right?
Yes.
So much good advice and lots to think about and take away. What is one thing that you would tell everyone in our audience to go do today from an employee perspective, and then maybe from a management perspective as well? Where do we begin? Tim, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. I'd say if you didn't get the hint before, get a password manager. Uh, use it, love it. It's just like when you went from like the iPhone 8 with the home button to then going to the new iPhone where you had to get used to like all the gestures and stuff. It stinks for a week and then you're used to it and then you can't imagine life without it. That's how technology works, and that's how you should be approaching this as well. Is it stinks, get used to it. It's going to help you out so much in the long run. And then from a management standpoint, again, I think having more conversations around this topic, taking the things that are happening in the news, and you don't have to beat people over the head with it. It doesn't have to be a 2-hour seminar. It can be a 5-minute discussion with your team about here's what happened, here's how it happened, and and just asking the question, what can we do together to prevent something like this from happening to us?
Great advice. Mike, anything you'd add?
Just get started on it today. I think whatever scenario you fit in, take what Tim said and get started on it. Today is the best time.
I love it. One last question for both of you, and thank you so much for all the great information, and to our audience for your questions. If you have additional questions, pose them now so we can get to them before we wrap up, and make sure you're posting to panelists and attendees so everyone can see. But Marco obviously works with companies of all sizes. I know, Tim, we talked a lot about startups and you're very familiar with that space. Is it different? Is the advice different? Or, I think especially with smaller companies that might not have, a chief information officer or somebody who's devoted to tech security, what do you do if you're in that position? We've talked about how everybody is vulnerable. So if you can't afford, a mic in your organization, what do you do? Tim, do you want to start?
Yeah. So I think again, the advice kind of just is the same. If you're a small business, again, I don't think that necessarily alleviates you from any of these threats. You have to be vigilant. You have to have these conversations. If it helps, go into your calendar right now and make a repeating event that's 5 minutes long once a month that you just think about this topic and bring it up to people. The more we can talk about it and the more that you can just see what other people are doing and become aware of it. Again, people find technology intimidating, I think, very frequently, and it really doesn't have to be. It's just basic things like using a password manager. And if you can do some of those real basic things to start when you are a startup or you have a small headcount in your company, starting it now and building that into your culture now will be when you get to Marco's size, then you've got that ingrained in your entire company, and you'll just continue to be successful on that front.
Great. Mike, anything you'd add just for specifically for small companies that might just not have as many resources to throw at this?
Yeah, the fundamentals are the same regardless of company size, and there's a lot of resources as to what those fundamentals are. We post a list out on our website. We can make that available. Like I said, the U.S. government through NIST CSF has a lot of information that's available specifically for small businesses. It all says the same thing. I think the biggest thing is find somebody that's good to work with, find a good partner, have the conversation, seek guidance, and don't be afraid to seek guidance from multiple places to make sure you're getting a good gut check. Yep. But again, those block and tackle or those fundamental things are generally going to be the same across the board, regardless of size. And like Tim said, it doesn't matter, when you get to be a company Marco size, if those fundamentals weren't in place, that's still our weakest link. And we still have to do that before we can do anything else. So
sure.
Great place to start.
Two more questions from our audience. Kim wants to know, do you recommend multi-factor authentication or two-factor for organizations and personal use? Is that two-factor? Is that a winning approach? Mike?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I would say, again, when we go look at those things that are fundamental security things, multi-factor or two-factor is typically going to be on that. Your organizations, you should be using it to protect all of your company data. That's cybersecurity insurance was mentioned earlier. That's probably the single largest change we've seen within the cyber insurance space recently. Is it used to be, do you have MFA on remote connections? To now it's, do you have MFA everywhere? We do want to see that used everywhere. And I would always encourage it for personal stuff as well. Again, we talked LinkedIn, Amazon, whatever those things are, implement that two-factor verification, whether it's a simple SMS text code or a smart app on your phone. It's always a good thing to do.
Okay, great. We talked a little bit about the best password managers for personal use. Mark wants to know, what are the top enterprise class password managers? Tim, do you have a favorite?
I'd say that's probably more up Mike's alley, because we mostly use, like I said, we use 1Password at our company, but I know, Mike, you probably have a lot better recommendations than I do.
Yeah, we typically see Thycotic Secret Server, that's THY Thycotic, or CyberArk. Those are the predominant. I'd say they're probably the number one, number two globally in password management. Those are very recommended platforms in enterprise space.
Okay. And I think it might be worth, we have people asking again about password managers. Clearly they're getting the message, you guys, you've done your job. So maybe could you just repeat one more time, Mike, the ones that you had recommended for personal use as well?
Yeah, 1Password, Dashlane, or LastPass, no particular order.
Okay. Here's an interesting question that Don asks. He says he's been reading that hackers might look to see if you have cybersecurity insurance and base their demands on that. Wow. I mean, what do you do about that? Anything, Mike?
Well, first off, I guess I really haven't seen that they're looking at insurance prior to an event happen, because typically that's harder to get information. It's not the most readily available. You'd have to be into the system typically to get that ahead of time, or maybe you got it through a vendor or something like that, where there's more effort involved. That said, it's not impossible. It's certainly something that could happen. How do I feel about it? Not great. I mean, that's where the world's coming to, and there's not a lot you can do about it, to be frank. The other one that I've seen on the other side is we have seen threat actors gain access to bank accounts and know how much an organization has for cash on hand and that type of thing, and they'll set that as part of the ransom as well. And that's another one. There's not a lot you can do about it. I mean, you're in it. You're either going to make that decision of pay the ransom or don't pay the ransom and go a different route. So it all comes back to do everything you can to protect yourselves as best as possible and avoid getting into that situation in the first place. An ounce of prevention is a pound of cure in this place.
That's for sure. I want to let everyone know that we will make a recording of today's webinar available. So, because I think a lot of people are like, wait, what was that again? So you can go back and watch it. You can share it with your whole staff and your colleagues and get all of these services and all of this great advice. Mike put the names of those enterprise passwords in the chat again. It's Psychotic, Secret Server, and CyberArk. Those are two of the enterprise password managers. And someone else asks, are either of you familiar with Bitwarden? Is that a name or a company that, yes or no?
It's more open, yeah, so vaguely familiar. It's more open source based. So again, that would come down to if you accept the conditions that come with more open source type solutions and have the ability to patch and manage and handle them. If that's in your tool set, you can do it, sure, have fun. I'd say that's probably not something the general consumer that doesn't have that technical skill level probably should do, but yeah.
Okay. All right, great. Any final words of advice? I know I got to run right now and change a whole bunch of passwords. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be thinking of the two of you all day long as I set everything up. Anything else that you would emphasize before we sign off today?
I guess just the fact that you're here or you're watching this recording, you're on the right track. It's like I said before, this whole thing is a cat and mouse game. It's never ending. You can never do a chef's kiss and say, voila, we're done. It's a never ending fight for keeping your stuff safe. So just as the actors who are committing these crimes are getting more sophisticated, you need to get more sophisticated too. And you know, ignorance is no excuse at this point. You know, you've watched this webinar, you kind of know what you need to do, so go do it.
Sounds good. Mike, we'll let you have the last word if you want to, one more plea for everyone to take this stuff seriously.
No, security is a journey. It's not a destination, right? That's the old cliche everybody's heard. The best time to get started on it is today. Again, have those conversations. You can reach out to probably Tim or I to further that conversation. And again, it's not all doom and gloom. You actually can defend your organization successfully against many of the things that are out there today. And it's not doom and gloom, but you got to start. You got to start somewhere.
You got to do the work. Well, thank you both so much, Tim and Mike, for your expertise. We've all learned a lot. I think I speak for everyone when I say that. Thank you for all the tips and advice. Thank you to our sponsors today, the Jed Mahonis Group and Marco, for making this event possible. And thank you all for joining us and participating, for all the great questions. As I said before, the webinar will be available online in just the next few days. You'll find all sorts of other great TCB talks and Studio TCB Insights seminars there. We hope you'll check it out. We hope you'll go fix your passwords immediately and think of Mike and Tim when you do it. Thanks again for joining us and have a great afternoon.